since we have our union organizer on, Elon and Trump's attacks on the federal workforce is really being interpreted as an attack on workers. 3 million federal workers around the world. It's no wonder that they're also, Elon and Musk are targeting labor rights and the right to organize. Trump ousted the former head of the NLRB and then also fired one of the senior officials, Gwynne Wilcox. And so now NLRB is completely useless as an agency. They don't have quorum. They don't have enough people to function because they're not being staffed properly. DOGE, or Doggy as I'm calling Doggy, is also targeting the Department of Labor and recently got access to all Department of Labor information, which a judge ruled was like chill. A federal judge ruled that Elon Musk-led DOGE service can access Labor Department data on millions of Americans, marking a setback from unions that sought to block DOGE's work. Did I say Doji? I meant Doggy. I think Doggy is the way I'm going to call it. Erica Groshin, a commissioner of Labor Department's Bureau of Labor Statistics during the Obama administration, said there's a danger in granting Doggy access to BLS data, which tracks many economic indicators and often moves financial markets. But that's not all, because there's also an inspector general at the Department of Labor, like normally looks over waste and abuse and fraud. All these inspector generals have been fired, including the National Labor Relations Board as inspector general. The board has 17 open investigations against Elon Musk's companies, Tesla and SpaceX, for alleged unfair labor practices, safety violations, and discriminatory work practices, which include like using the N-word, not hiring Black people, on and on and on and on. NATO workers, and this I think is really important to know, and you can tell you, then I want you to take it from here, but federal workers are not going quietly. The largest union of federal workers, American Federation of Government Employees, held a rally in DC today. They've seen its ranks grow in 5 weeks by 14,000 people joined. They're also suing AFGE and AFSCME are filing lawsuits against the government, who are making it easier to fire civil servants. They're suing on these buyouts. Apparently 60,000 workers of the 3 million have taken buyouts. They're calling it illegal, of course. Then American Federation of Teachers, National Active and Retired Federal Employees Association, International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, or Machinists, and the National Federation of Federal Employees filed suit against the Treasury, that the Treasury has disclosed contents of the government system that includes records on Americans' tax refunds and Social Security benefits. Also, they are suing, claiming that the Department of Ed is allowing Doggy to get access to student loan borrowers' information, and on and on and on. But it's NATO, it's like, it's when Trump has been in office to try to break things that we start to like wake up to said things being important. I think you have a joke, something along the lines of like, like Russia can have our democracy, we weren't using it anyway, or something, when you don't like use it or lose it kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But it is kind of nice to see like AFGE and these federal unions like standing up for themselves, because truly they are the only ones who can and will.
Yeah, I mean, I work for a public sector union, and I lead collective bargaining. So we have about 68,000 members with 175 contracts, mostly local government workers, cities and counties all across Northern California. And so we have maybe 10,000 workers in the private sector and are affected by the National Labor Relations Board. And I've been in the labor movement for 28 years, and the Biden NLRB was the best thing about the Biden administration from my perspective. Like, Jennifer Abruzzo, who's the general counsel for the Biden NLRB, issued these like directives, and the nature of labor law historically is that the federal government would sort of like open a door, and then workers would push through it bigger than expected. And so Abruzzo would sort of announce these things, and we just ran with it and like didn't wait for it to work its way through the courts. And so the and the other thing that is like the most palpable change was that new elections for union representation under Biden went up, I want to say 85% or something.
Wow.
that there was this huge surge in new representation elections, and critically, like the time period got cut way down. So like historically, I've seen, you know, in the 3 decades of my career, there were times where like a group of workers would want to file to have a union election, and the employer could like, you know, tie them up in court for 3 years of hearings,
Right.
to prevent them from even getting to a vote. And that sort of like, from what I saw, pretty much stopped under Biden. And so we were able to get to elections much more quickly because, but at the same time, like, you know, the NLRB has always been a frustrating agency for me. I probably filed, you know, thousands of unfair labor practice charges in my career. And, you know, other than
That's
around,
just on around stand up
yeah,
and like the conditions.
the conditions to stand up. For some reason, it didn't work. And, you know, I only actually got to a hearing once, you know,
Yeah.
in years. So like, you know, the just to give you, and I say that like not because the agency is not important, but you know, it's not like the way that that Doggy and the right wing people talk about the oversight of regulatory bodies is like, you know, the NLRB is like you know, actively palpating Elon's prostate on a daily basis. The bar of what a company has to do for federal agencies to get involved is so fucking high, and they have such a like unreasonable workload, and there's been so many years, like they're big, but there's still not enough funding for all the work that they have to do at
Yeah.
every federal agency. And so there's always a backlog, and there's always like, so they're not really aggressively pursuing anything but the most serious cases. And
Which is
so
crazy that there's 17 out against Elon's companies.
yeah, right. You know, I mean, that's how bad it is.
Right.
And so, you know, I've been talking to like other, you know, the staff of our union and other lead bargainers within SEIU about like what it means to sort of Trump-proof collective bargaining. Like, what do we need to do in our bargaining process so that we and be fighting about directly with employers so that that we don't have to rely on the NLRB. And I think, you know, I am excited that unions are leading the charge on legal challenges to these Trump orders. We are probably going to join some of the legal challenges on some of the sanctuary policies,
Yeah.
to you know, ruin the lives of our immigrant community members. But I think pretty squarely, like, I think, you know, a lot of unions are realizing that in the next 4 years, the question of like political strikes and illegal strikes have to be on the table for unions.
Yes.
You know, that we're going to be like pushing the boundary of what is historically legal and appropriate in order to challenge, you know, it's in order to survive.
Right.
And in fact, the labor movement was small when we did the things that we did that got us big. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm. Mhm.
Like, you know, it wasn't, I was just talking to my children at the dinner table, typical green household dinner
Oh
table
boy.
conversation about the Ludlow massacre and like, you know,
Yes.
and about the history of Pinkertons. There was
Uh-huh.
a time when, you know, the National Guard was routinely deployed to gun down striking workers,
Yep.
and workers took action and beat that back and built the labor movement and built, you know, like the baby boom and the American middle class on top of that. And so if that's what we're heading back to, that's what we're heading back to.
I mean, I remember when I feel like you were on, or we were talking about like the Janus decision and, getting rid of like automatic dues collection from unions, which is a major driver of their power and being able to function. And the Janus decision, I feel like you or other organizers were saying maybe it's like a good kick in the teeth for unions, and not having the NLRB to rely on, although it is wildly dangerous, is like maybe that is a good thing to what you're saying, to get back to some of this militancy and to stop like, and I want to ask you about other union leaders, but I don't know, maybe there's an argument there.
Yeah, well, I mean, so one there's an important sort of legal note about the NLRB, which is, you know, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. There are these cases winding their way through the courts, challenging the constitutionality of the NLRB entirely, and saying that the entire thing is unconstitutional. And a lot of people are afraid about that. And if the entire NLRB is unconstitutional, then it really changes the game, because what has happened, because the NLRB, the federal government has preempted labor law from going to the states. And so
Mm,
what it means is that California could pass its own collective bargaining laws that are better than the NLRB, which we
mhm,
already have in the public sector in California.
mhm.
And so Democratic trifecta states can create, where most of the economy is, can create their own labor law structures that are stronger than what has historically been done by the NLRB. And I think the right may regret opening up that door. The other thing that I said about Janus, when we talk about the sort of open shop environment, the Janus decision in 2018 made open shop national in the public sector, but it was already legal in the private sector in a bunch of states.
Mm,
And one of the strongest unions in the country is the Unite Here, the hotel and restaurant employees, what they call the culinary union in Las Vegas.
right.
That with no, with they've been open shop forever, and the reason that Nevada elects Democrats to the Senate and has been a blue state is because of the culinary union. Full
Yeah.
stop. That
Yeah.
they built, that like they have something like 50,000 union members on the Las Vegas Strip in casinos. You and I talked to some of them,
Mhm.
while you were on your way to the strip club,
Oh, yes.
um, uh, and they they pull hotel workers out of the casinos by the hundreds to go door to door in working class communities in Nevada every election. And they've demonstrated that it can be done in incredible hostile political conditions,
Right.
and you can still win. So they lit the way for all of us, and we can learn those lessons and apply them everywhere.
Open shop, just to clarify, is when there's like people who are part of a union and people who are not. Is that correct? In
That's right.
one.
That's right. So the contract. I mean, this is like we were talking about AFGE. So the contract covers all of the workers who are represented, and the union has an obligation to represent all of the workers who might have complaints under the contract, but not everybody is compelled to be a member of the union.
Got it.
So the um, the unions and emergency rooms are the only services that are provided by private entities that are legally required to provide the service, whether people pay for them or not.
Mm.
So,
Okay, thanks for explaining that. And I wanted to ask you, because I had Bill Fletcher on recently, and he was saying that he was pretty upset that, like, Sean Fain, after, talking a big game about like fighting the right and whatnot, and like, General Strike 2028, which would be great, also is like, we're willing to work with Trump. And granted, this was 2 weeks ago. So this was before a lot of the worst of doggy like came to pass. And so who knows? I was checking out Fane's like Twitter. It is very quiet lately. But Teamsters head Sean O'Brien was also sort of reamed for this, working with the right. And yet, I don't know how. I'm not willing to be so. I'm not the head of a union, so I'm not willing to be super draconian about like, I don't think that you should work with, whatever, a senator on like a good piece of legislation. But where do you fall on all this? Like, what do you think about this, like working with Trump? Fletcher was like, they don't want us. Why would we do that?
um, yeah, I mean, I think there's a Samuel Gompers, who founded the AFL-CIO, or the American Federation of Labor, said we have no permanent friends or permanent enemies, only permanent interests.
Mm,
And so, like, Sean O'Brien like did some weird stuff. Sean Fain, I saw that the thing that he said about working with Trump, and it didn't seem sincere to me. It felt rhetorical,
mm,
and in the sense that, and this comes up not just with Trump. I mean, I've dealt with this with Democratic politicians in California, where I think as like I don't, I think we need to establish that labor won't uncritically support any Democrat. And I think we need to make demands of all politicians and let all politicians fail to meet those demands and then attack them on that basis. Do you know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
So I think it's completely appropriate for the leader of the United Auto Workers to say, all right, motherfucker, if you want to make America great again, here's what that means to us. Here's the things that we need. And
sure,
Trump is not going to do it. And then the UAW, who certainly has members who voted for Trump, and who need to bring those members along, can go back to those members and be like, look, guys, we tried, and
yeah,
here's what they did.
yeah,
Um, that I think of all organizing is essentially like brokering a coalition between the moderates and the militants within your group.
Mm-hmm.
And the moderates need to learn the hard way that moderation isn't going to work before they're ready to become militant.
We are. Oh, there's a lot of moderates learning the hard way.
Yeah.
NATO, thank you for that.
Fortunately, that's on the Green family crest, the hard way.
What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/bitchuation room. Do